Republicans holding the first hearing investigating the origins of the coronavirus pandemic, despite the notable absence of Dr. Anthony Fauci from today's panel of COVID experts, a couple of whom shared their concerns about a lack of accountability for the Chinese Communist Party.
I'm shocked we wouldn't, as a government, including my own non-proliferation-related colleagues at state, say that this was basically aiding and abetting an enemy adversary, a national adversary.
The bottom line is, I believe it is just too much of a coincidence that a worldwide pandemic caused by a novel bat coronavirus that cannot be found in nature started just a few miles away from a secretive laboratory doing potentially dangerous research on bat coronaviruses.
Let's bring in tonight's Dream Team to talk about what we know, what we learned today. Fox News contributors Leslie Marshall, Dr. Jeanette Neshwat, and Jason Chaffetz. Great to have you all back.
Hey, Shannon.
Hi, I want to play something from Richard Muller. He is a physics professor at UC Berkeley, what he said about trying to get to the bottom of this.
Some people say we will never know, not until China confesses, or unless there's a whistleblower. Well, we have a whistleblower. It was the virus itself. It came here, it came out of China, it came to us, and it carried with us genetic information.
So, Doctor, how can that be helpful for us in trying to get answers?
Well, first of all, transparency from China is critical, and that's why this investigation and this hearing today was so important. Knowing if this virus was asymptomatically transferable from person to person from the start could have saved millions of lives, thousands of lives here in the United States. So the more data we have, the more information we have, the better I can protect my patients, the better I can provide medical care for my patients, and the better we can prevent future pandemics or at least minimize the mortality moving forward. But it really is unconscionable if China had this information. We know there was an extreme lack of transparency from the start. So any information they withheld from us really needs to be looked at further, and action needs to be taken.
Jason, no Democrats at that hearing today. They did not take part. There's been plenty of criticism, but a spokesperson for Speaker Nancy Pelosi said this: perhaps if Republicans were actually interested in real answers, they would remember that the House Intelligence Committee is reviewing the intelligence on this matter in addition to the Biden administration's own review. So you've played this game on Capitol Hill. Can they really be knocked for not showing up if there's another investigation underway?
That is absolutely ridiculous. The Congress has never ceded its power just because the administration was doing some sort of investigation. That wasn't true on a host of things, including 9/11, which was so tragic. And so they've never ceded that. The Intelligence Committee should be looking at it, but it's an embarrassment for the Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats to not hold a hearing about the origins of something that killed hundreds of thousands of people. It should have been a bipartisan hearing. They should have been conducted by the Democrats. They're in the majority, but for their refusal to participate, it left it to the hands of Steve Scalise to have a just Republican hearing. And Dr. Fauci should have been there. He has time to be on the cover of InStyle magazine and be on the cover of People magazine, but he can't answer questions from members of Congress. It's an embarrassment.
Well, Congressman Jim Jordan, top Republican, had this to say about Dr. Fauci's no-show.
If Dr. Fauci would come today and answer our questions, he could have come here and defend himself, but he didn't have the courage to do it. I'm convinced these guys knew right from the get-go what the truth was, and they misled the American people.
And Leslie, we continue to get more and more information from those emails that were FOIA that we got to look at from Dr. Fauci, other conversations, phone conversations, papers. There are trails of other information that seem to suggest there could be some conflict from what he was saying publicly and what he was saying privately. Does he owe the American people an answer, or could he clarify if he showed up?
Well, quite frankly, he can't clarify because the decision is already made. This is nothing but a Republican circus. It's political theater. I don't know why it's not on the top 25 picks of voters coming up in the midterm elections. It certainly won't be in the general election. What we do know is that the majority of the international scientific and medical community agreed with what we've been told by not only Dr. Fauci, he's not the only one out there speaking to us, but there are people speaking within the United States and outside the United States that said, look, because, and I've mentioned this before, COVID's father and grandfather had a animal variant, an animal vector. That's why they assumed that this one did. They're not saying it's out of the realm of possibility that it could be from a lab, but what we also know is we're not at the end of the 90-day period that the president set forth. We basically, what they're trying to do, in my opinion, as a Democrat, is Republicans are trying to have a court without having enough evidence. And we don't have enough evidence. We don't have investigators that have been able to get into that lab. And sadly, I'm not trying to be a pessimist, but I fear with the Chinese Communist government, we may never be able to do that.
Yeah, because to get a whistleblower out of there, they risk everything, including their families, their liberty, and potentially their lives, if they do have information that conflicts with what the CCP wants us to know publicly. Thank you, panel. Great to see all of you tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon.